Okay, so what we want to do is we really want to understand the first chapter of the book, because that sets up everything that happens. So we want to think in terms of the two main characters that are introduced, and that's Mr. Jones and then Old Major. So Mr. Jones, he's the owner of Manor Farm, right? And then Old Major is the old pair, right? Now what you want to think about is you want to think about Old Major's relationship to all the other animals, right? And the way that I use to explain this relationship and help us set up the rest of the book is, I say, well, Old Major's sort of like a doctor, right? He's a doctor and all the other animals are the patient. So setting up that analogy then allows us to go one step further and use what I call the medical analogy. So with the medical analogy, what we have is we have three steps. You know, when you go to see the doctor, there are usually three basic steps that you go through. There's diagnosis, there's a therapy, and there's a state of health. Okay, so if we understand Old Major is sort of playing this role of doctor to a patient, right? We want to understand why life under Mr. Jones on the animal farm, why life under Mr. Jones on the Manor Farm is sick, is unhealthy, right? So I'll help you out by giving you a series of questions. You give me the answer. So, who does all the work on Manor Farm? All the animals, right? What do they receive in return for all that work that they do? Do they receive a lot, or do they receive a little?
Just enough.
Just enough for what?
For survival.
So they can continue to do what? That's right. That's what Marx calls minimum wage, right? They get enough to keep them alive so they can continue to work. Who receives almost all of the benefit of the animal's work? Mr. Jones. All right, now, when the animals can no longer work, does Mr. Jones allow them to retire? You know, like Boxer, you put in, 12 years on the animal farm, you get to retire to the nice backfield and, chew the grass and eat the apples and, relax until you die.
So Mr. Jones sells them if he can get money from it, or just like make the desk.
Hey, it kills them, right? Kills them. So when the worker can no longer work, Jones just gets rid of him. Right? So Jones just disposes of animals that can't work. Right? Okay, now, is Jones and the humans, are they the majority or the minority? They're the minority, right? There are fewer of them on the farm than the animals, right? So the animals are the majority, right? Yet Jones gets a majority of the resources and has a majority of the power, right? So this is an unequal distribution of resources and power. Right? The minority has a majority of the power, majority of the resources. The majority has a minority of the resources, a minority of the power. This is what the doctor explains to the patient. This is why life on the manor farm is unhealthy for all you animals. You're being exploited, right? Marx in the Communist Manifesto writes that history is a record of the exploitation of the many by the few, right? Or the exploitation of the majority by the minority, right? So that's what Old Major is explaining to the animals, right? This is the sort of Marxist critique of capitalist culture. Now, what's the therapy that the doctor suggests to the patient? In other words, if you want to make this situation healthy because it's unhealthy, what's the medicine? What's the therapy? That's right, rebellion. Now, ask yourself this question. Why does it have to be rebellion? Right? So if I'm Boxer, right, I go up to Mr. Jones and I say, you know what, Mr. Jones, I just don't feel like plowing today. I'm tired. I need a rest. What's Mr. Jones going to do? Well, he's either going to get out the whip and beat me and say, go back to work, slave, or he's going to say, fine, you don't want to work, you don't get to eat. Right? Is Mr. Jones going to give up his power? No. So if you're not going to give up the power, if Mr. Jones isn't going to give up the power, what's the only option we have? We have to take it. Right? That's why Old Major prescribes rebellion. Right? Now, what's the state of health? So we have to sort of visually understand what the illness looks like. So look at it like this. It's a hierarchy, right? At the top are Jones, humans, the minority, and then at the bottom are all the animals. Old Major believes this is unfair because all the animals do a majority of the work, right? But they only receive a small amount of the resources. So how do we correct this? Well, we correct it through rebellion. Now, if this is what illness looks like, right, this hierarchy, what does health look like? Yeah. So we could visualize it like this, right? All animals are equal. This is called egalitarianism. Right? And it's expressed in that statement, all animals are equal. Now, as a doctor, he wants to show the patient what health looks like. Right? So how does he do that? Well, what does he call everybody in the barn? Comrade. So it doesn't matter, if I'm a pig and you're a horse and you're a sheep, we're all comrades. Right? That indicates that we're all equal. Right? There's no difference. Even though we're different animals, we're all the same. We're all comrades. Now, what else does he do to sort of communicate this egalitarianism, the fact that all animals are equal? There's one more thing that he does that's important.
Like carve two specific animals around
Well, think about this, all right, so the manor farm is made up of domesticated animals, right, all the farm animals, and then you have the wild animals like the rats, right? And they want to know, or Major wants to know if they include the rats, the wild animals, in the rebellion. So what does he say? We need to take a what? How do we decide that whether or not to include the rats?
Oh,
That's right, we vote. Now, think about this. If I'm a pig and you're a horse and you're a sheep, do our votes count differently because we're different animals? No, all votes are equal, right? A vote is a vote is a vote is a vote, right? That's another expression of egalitarianism, right? A vote. So here what he's trying to communicate to the animals is this is what egalitarianism looks like, right? We're all comrades, we're all in this together and we all have equal power, right? It's an equal distribution of power, right? So that looks pretty good. But now what Orwell does in the book is he sort of offers a critique of Marx, right? Because this is Marx, right? So we want to think about criticism of egalitarianism. And I could, and maybe I'll cite different writers and thinkers who sort of made similar critiques, but you could find everything that you need to know about Orwell's critique of egalitarianism within the context of the book, and looking at the pig's behavior and how they act among themselves and then how they treat the other animals, right? So there are three basic differences that Orwell helps us understand that are sort of really strong criticisms against this idea that all animals are equal, or that we should all be equal, right? The first is what I call the biological. Now, think about this. Who are the smartest animals on the animal farm? Pigs. We're the dumbest. The sheep.
Oh.
Yeah, it's the sheep because they just follow. They just, the horse at least he can at least come up with his own slogans, right? He's not much better than the sheep, but he's a little bit better than the sheep. But the sheep are just outright stupid, right? They just follow, right? Now, did the pigs choose to be born smart? No. Did the sheep choose to be born stupid? All right. So what is it that makes them different? The biology. Right? So pigs are naturally smart. Sheep aren't. No amount of learning is going to turn a sheep into a pig. Right? Now there's another criticism. We call this the ethical. In other words, this is how people treat one another. Right? So think about this. The pigs, do they treat all the other animals like they treat one another? Especially once they get rid of Snowball and sort of the dissension of the pigs has been removed. Right? Do the pigs treat the other animals as equal to the pigs? No. So think about this, right? Me, Jeff, and one of your family members, Jeff, is on an island. We're on an island, right? And that island can only sustain 2 people. Who's going to get voted off that island? The stranger, right? There's no probably about it, right? Because if it hadn't been that way, pre-history, you wouldn't be sitting in this room now, right? If your ancestors had a preference for strangers, you'd be dead, right? You wouldn't be here. Your genes wouldn't have survived, right? So we have this sort of hardwired preference for family members over strangers, right? And this behavior is exhibited by the pigs, right? Pigs have a preference for pigs over all the other animals, right? So when they start changing the rules, they're changing it for their benefit, right? Not for the benefit of the other animals, right? And we have another sort of criticism of egalitarianism. We call this the social. Now, things, in a way, start to go wrong on Animal Farm when Snowball is chased off, right? Because all the other animals see how Napoleon deals with opposition, disagreement, right? That's why when Boxer says Napoleon is always right, there's a lot more truth than that in that statement than he perhaps imagines or even can understand. Why? Because if Napoleon isn't always right, he just kills you. Right? So, therefore, Napoleon is always right. Now, the problem with that is, of course, we can imagine, especially with someone like Benjamin, who's just as smart as the pigs, right? We can imagine that, you know, there's an animal like Benjamin, or Benjamin himself, and he sees them building the first version of the window. Now, he's a smart animal. And what does he perhaps realize? He realizes that the walls are too thin, right? The wind is going to knock it down. Does he say anything? No. Because he realizes if he does, that's death, right? So see, when you don't have disagreement, where you have an environment where you can't have disagreement, you can't also have progress, right? The British Romantic poet William Blake says this in a lot of different ways. One way he says it, he says, without contraries, there's no progression. And opposition is true friendship. Emerson and Nietzsche also pick up on the same sort of attitude about being an opponent is a good way to sort of cement a friendship. Right? If you're going to be a good friend, you have to sort of be opposition. So we can see that this is, a central part to making progress in society. And this is something that's absent on Animal Farm after Snowball is expelled, and we see the consequences, right? The window falls down, right? Because no one could stand up and oppose or disagree with Napoleon. So these are three criticisms of egalitarianism. Now what we want to see is we want to see the failure of egalitarianism. Okay, so when we think about egalitarianism, the idea is that all animals are equal. So if all animals are equal, that means that there should be an equal distribution of resources and power and education, right? Those are the three areas that clearly demonstrate an unequal distribution, right? So first let's look at food.
Pigs get more than every animal.
Right, so we have, first we have the milk, right?
Apples.
And we have the apples, and we have the beer, right? When the rations are being adjusted, right? In other words, lessened for the other animals, the pig's rations are never adjusted, right? So then we look at work. So, for example, how many days a week do all the other animals work? 7, right? Because if you don't work on Sunday, Sunday is voluntary, right? That's just like my job is voluntary. It's voluntary to work on Animal Farm on Sundays, but what happens if you don't volunteer? You don't eat, right? That's the way in which my job is voluntary. Adults can, if you don't want to work, that's fine. Not going to eat, right? So the pigs, however, do the pigs work 7 days a week?
No.
No. Okay, now, do the pigs do physical labor? No. Do the pigs get up early? There you go. See, an unequal distribution of work, right? So pigs don't get up early. Don't do physical labor. And don't work 7 days a week. Okay. Now let's look at education.
Pig naturally can read things.
Yeah, but later on, the pigs have the other animals build a school, right?
Yeah, but like other animals can really do better for
Well, but Benjamin, right?
yeah.
Benjamin's smart. So the pigs get the other animals to build the school, but can the other animals attend the school? No, right? The pigs keep the education to themselves, right? Now think about power. Before Snowball is exiled from the animal farm, right, there's this sort of distribution of power that exists between the pigs and the other animals. The pigs come up with the ideas and present them to the other animals, and the other animals have the power of the vote, right? So there's some sort of equality, right? They play different roles, but everybody gets a share of the power, right? So the animals have the power of approval or disapproval by vote. What's the first thing that Napoleon gets rid of as soon as he exiles Snowball? What can the animals no longer do? They can't vote, right? Napoleon takes away the vote. Right, so you can look at food, work, education, and power, and you can see, just by those 4 categories alone, the failure of egalitarianism. Right? It sounded good in theory, right? It sounded like a really great theory under Old Major, but when it came to putting that theory into practice, it breaks down. Right? So now we want to understand what is it that separates the pigs from the other animals, right? You guys want to take a picture of this before I make it go away?